the sky. About massive down here.
Central Daylight Time.
Softball size hail. Storm just south of Baker within the last few minutes.
Hey, there's something forming right above us. Oh, look at this.
Good morning, everybody. This is a live severe weather briefing with a ton to talk about. Today is May 3rd, 2020. So this is the 21-year anniversary of the first F5 tornado that I ever intercepted. There you can see it near peak intensity. This is near the Bridge Creek area when it really wedged out. You can see that massive clear slot punching in there, the cylinder tornado cyclone below it, and then the textbook wedge. There you can see that large RFD gust front. There are even some land spout tornadoes further down the flanking line to the south of the RFD gust front throughout this day. There you can see looking north near the Bridge Creek area. That's Matt Sanis driving the soft top Geo tracker there looking off to the north. And we actually lost our orientation a bit in a grove of trees. And then when we emerged from that grove of trees, we were right in the path of the tornado in our soft top Geo tracker. 5 of us, freshmen in meteorology at the University of Oklahoma. I had just turned 19 back then. We look in the path and we had just crossed underneath an overpass. And we came up with a mob decision that we were going to evacuate the vehicle, run to the overpass, grind it out, try to keep ourselves protected from debris. There was a family underneath the overpass that was flipping out as that tornado was approaching. There you could see the tornado approaching on the left. Thankfully, we were south of the path. Back then, I wasn't as familiar as getting to close range to these strong tornadoes. Misjudged it just a little bit, but if I were to rechase this day, I'd likely be up the road about another 1/8 of a mile, right on the south side of that large tornado, but it was at F5 intensity right here. This is an overpass near the Newcastle area, just as this tornado was about to head into Moore. And this was also the first time that we saw the dark side that these tornadoes leave behind. That is the damage and the loss of life and property. And just after this, we came into Moore, Oklahoma. There was debris falling out of the sky. There were horses that were meandering in the road. You could smell natural gas, and people were already emerging from their homes. And definitely the first time I had seen the dark side that these storms leave behind. And is that much more important for storm chasers to continue to go out there calling in these reports, warning people in the path of these storms. And definitely is a dichotomy out there, though, when you see these powerful vortices. You see the meteorology unfold right in front of you. It's a wonder of nature, certainly, these powerful vortices, but then you see the dark side that they leave behind, the loss of life and property, and it's that much more motivating to try to warn people in the path of these storms and help out the best that we can. But this tornado right here, as I mentioned, was 21 years ago. So I was recording on a VHS-C camcorder. There you can see Rick Thomas. He was a meteorology student back then, one of the top in his class, and then decided that it just wasn't for him, the math and that, and went into botany. Now he's a nutrition and fitness expert, still has an interest in meteorology, but there you can see that F5 tornado crossing just to the north. There's the soft top Geo tracker that Matt Sanis wishes that he still had. But now let's talk about the severe weather threat ahead. Of course, breaking down some radar here with the line of severe thunderstorms that's moving through southern Missouri. That's the Radar Omega app in the bottom right part of the screen. You can see that severe thunderstorm watch. That includes southern Missouri there, southwestern Missouri for that line of storms that has just gone through the Springfield area, producing some big hail and some damaging straight line winds. And then up there in the upper left, that's the target area for Monday, late afternoon and evening. I think there's a more substantial tornado threat there across far southeastern Kansas, into southwestern Missouri, maybe down into northeastern Oklahoma, but it does look like that greatest tornado threat is probably going to be southeastern Kansas into southwestern Missouri, probably between about 5 and 10 p.m. Tomorrow, late afternoon through evening. I'm going to be chasing that setup, so I'm about to turn back around, drive all the way back out to Missouri, and chase this setup because it looks like the next 7 to 10 days here in the first half of May is going to be quiet as the atmosphere breathes just a little bit, and I do expect the second half and the end of May to be extremely active, similar to how last year definitely came alive in traditional Tornado Alley and beyond, even over portions of the Ohio River Valley with Dayton getting hit by a violent tornado. I think that traditional Tornado Alley in this case is going to come alive Looks like about the middle part of May through the end. Some of the long range model forecast, the CFS, showing unprecedented in terms of how active it's going to be. But anytime you look that far in advance, you definitely have to take it with a grain of salt because the models can certainly flip-flop. And here is the zoom in of the severe thunderstorms that are ongoing right now. This is the Radar Omega app. Let me loop this. We are going to have some robust annotation methods too, so I can start to draw on this in real time. They're also going to produce a new base map in the next update here in the next week or two that's going to be smooth as butter, so we'll be able to access these and zoom in and out with ease. But this, you can see, is a textbook bow echo that is now to the east of Springfield. Marshfield, you're next in line. This was impacting, the brunt of this was impacting portions of the I-44 corridor there in southwestern Missouri from Joplin to Springfield. Now the most intense part of that bow is dropping into the Ozarks here, the Ozark region of southern Missouri. There you can see the apex of that bow zooming in. That's near Fordland, Diggins, Missouri. This is the Rogersville, Missouri area here. This is beautiful terrain in the Ozarks here of southern Missouri. Sparta, you're getting dominated right now by some big time winds. Probably getting some rear inflow jet action now. Maybe some positively charged lightning strikes as well on the backside of that. But this line is definitely heading straight into the Ozarks. And you can see a couple little renegade showers developing out ahead of it. But the main deal is just this bow echo that's moving off to the east-southeast. That's why we've got a slight risk for this region all the way through portions of Tennessee, as this is going to be a long-lived bow echo that's going to continue moving across all the way to through the Tennessee River Valley. There's a lot of cape that's to the south of this bow as it is propagating just a little bit to the right into that cape. This thing is oriented, is located along the southern periphery of a stronger mid-level flow as well. So that's going to continue driving this to the east, supported by the mid-levels, also supported by the moisture that this convection is propagating into. And when you have sufficient deep layer shear, these squall lines and bow echoes maintain themselves. They're able to maintain balance and become quite long-lived. The convection can maintain an upright configuration on the leading edge of that bow echo. That's called RKW theory that we learned back in school. And when you have the wind shear, you get two counter-rotating vortices, one created by the cold pool itself, and then one in the open environment that's created by the wind shear, the bulk shear, basically. And when those counter-rotating vortices are roughly similar, that maintains upright convection along the leading edge of this bow echo. Winds over 60 to 70 miles an hour at the apex of the bow just moved through Rogersville, Ava, Mountain Grove. You're eventually going to get this bow echo as well, probably the most intense portion of this bow. Here you can see these severe thunderstorm warnings. This says hail isn't as large as the wind threat, but winds over 60 miles an hour. The whole line itself is moving at 55 miles an hour, so it's very easy to get those strong winds, and you're mixing down those strong winds just above the ground down to the surface with the cold pool there as all that rain and the hail is falling. But this thing is just going to continue moving off to the east across southern Missouri, eventually into far northern Arkansas. Now going back to Monday's target area. Here first is that severe thunderstorm watch. And this is all the way down to the Arkansas border. Probably need to expand that watch into the far northern portions of Arkansas, maybe north central Arkansas, as this line continues to propagate off to the east-southeast. But here it is, and there's a pool of cape and moisture to the south of it. There's deep layer shear to maintain the vertical convection along its leading edge, and I think that this line is just going to continue to truck toward the Mississippi River Valley here, and eventually toward the Tennessee River Valleys as well. This current watch is only in effect until 4 p.m. as the line will be approaching the eastern edge of the watch by mid to late afternoon. Additional watches will definitely be needed downstream of that. But here is the SPC outlook. The slight risk definitely includes this ongoing bow echo with the severe weather threat that is happening right now. And you can see the slight risk does include those portions of far northern Arkansas, northeastern Arkansas. Eventually that thing is going to be moving into portions of the Tennessee River Valley, maybe even impacting the Nashville area later on tonight. And we could get a little bit more high plains, isolated severe weather too, but the post-frontal environment is just a little bit more diffuse after the convection that we had last night, moving through northeastern Colorado with the first severe thunderstorm warning of the season. I'll show you the surface map and show you just that we don't have a robust post-frontal environment with robust easterly flow up to 2 kilometers flipping around to the southwest. Still though, I could see southeastern Wyoming pumping out an isolated brief noodle or two, as it always does. You'll also get some development here down in the Permian Basin as well with a marginal severe weather threat. But as I mentioned, the big severe weather is going to be tomorrow, and that's what we're going to break down as well later on with these models. Looking at 500 millibars, here you can see the jet streak that I was telling you about that's embedded in the northwestern flow on the east side of this ridge. This is what's driving that convection that continues to move off to the east-southeast. This is the NAM forecast at about 4 p.m. So really this bow echo is riding along the southern periphery of that stronger mid-level flow. That's where you have sufficient wind shear, deep layer shear to maintain that vertical convection along the leading edge. You're also mixing down a lot of this westerly momentum wind through the mid-levels of the atmosphere down to the surface, and that's creating some of those stronger severe wind gusts. But I do expect this just to continue to propagate off to the right into far northern Arkansas, eventually to western Tennessee. There could be some storms developing out ahead of the bow also, which is why the slight risk has expanded off to the east, including portions of the southern Appalachian region. But it's this system here that is going to lead to the severe weather tomorrow, Monday late afternoon and evening, across this zone as a cold front is going to move off to the east. And the models are showing at least 2 to 3 supercells in the northern edge of that cold front at the nose of the instability where the strongest wind shear is going to be in place. And that's going to be on Monday afternoon. Looking at today, though, the reason the tornado threat is going to be so minimal is you have a lack of an open wave, and in this case, you don't have a real powerful upper level jet streak. So without the ageostrophic wind circulation, you don't have a lot of low level pressure falls, and overall, you have a relatively weak low level jet. But it was a system kind of like this that led to that big tornado in the middle of the night out in the Nashville region, but that was such a potent jet streak that it had such an intense circulation in the left exit region, or in general the exit region of that jet, that it was able to sustain that supercellular convection, lead to those lower level pressure falls, and result in a much stronger, more backed, or more southerly low level jet about 1 kilometer above the ground. In this case though, you've still got 20 knots out there. That's non-zero. There definitely is some non-zero low level shear, and that will also contribute to maintain that vertical convection along the leading edge of that bow. But I don't see the threat of renegade cells to be that substantial, but still you got to watch western central Tennessee into Kentucky here. Maybe ahead of that jet streak you could get some isolated supercells. There is plenty of bulk shear for transient supercell structures there, but it's just not that tight at the low levels in terms of low level shear. As I mentioned though, there is plenty of CAPE for this bow echo to propagate right into. You can see that CAPE blob oriented out ahead of it from far southeastern Missouri, northeastern Arkansas, across portions of the Tennessee River Valley into central Kentucky there. And this is well ahead of that bow echo that is charging through southwestern Missouri, right in the nose of that instability, and associated with that mid-level jet streak, but there's a lot of juicy air out ahead of it to continue propagating into. And I don't see the mid and deep the bulk shear subsiding at all based on the model, so I think this bow echo is just going to go all the way through, probably into this evening, eventually impacting portions of central Tennessee and Kentucky later on. And so now I really want to dig in deeper into the Monday target area. And here you can see the pink area is the area that I'm targeting for the greatest tornado potential from southwestern Missouri into far northeastern Arkansas. That's a forecast HRRR photograph that you see just below my noggin. And that's a textbook Photograph there for tornado potential with that due easterly storm motion at about 30 knots, a low-level jet near 30 knots, a lot of turning, and strong due westerly mid and upper level winds of about 40 to 50 knots. And so I expect supercells, monster supercells here on the northern part of the front, closer to that weaker surface low. These will likely develop here across southeastern Kansas, and then maybe around 3 or 4 p.m., maybe as late as 4 or 5, and then move into southwestern Missouri as we get a little bit closer to evening. The wind shear is not quite as favorable across eastern Oklahoma, but I do expect some supercell storms down there as well, maybe an isolated tornado warning or two. But I think that the greatest tornado threat is going to be in this zone, far southeastern Kansas into southwestern Missouri. And looking at this forecast photograph, relatively weaker surface winds there. This is near 7 p.m., so the lower atmosphere is beginning to decouple, which means that the surface winds weaken, the low-level jet intensifies, enhances that low-level shear. A lot of people assume that you need stronger surface winds to get low-level shear, and I hear lots of storm chasers say, man, the surface winds just aren't strong enough today. That can sometimes can show kind of a lack of understanding overall of a wind shear, especially at the low levels. But when you weaken the surface wind and you still have a 35 knot low-level jet at a kilometer of, you have a much larger 0 to 1 kilometer shear vector, 25 knots in this case. Let's say you have a stronger surface wind at 20 knots, then you're only talking about a 10 knot shear vector at the lowest levels. And the key is to have these long shear vectors at the low levels to generate a robust tornado threat. And you also desire that the storm motion be perpendicular, the storm motion vector be perpendicular to that low level shear vector. The closer to 90 degrees, this is called the critical angle there, that angle between the low level shear vector and the storm motion vector. That critical angle, the closer it is to 90 degrees, the more favorable it is for tornadoes as well. That's because the storm motion is parallel to those low-level, invisible, horizontally rotating tubes or vortex lines, and can more easily stretch those into the vertical. Out here at the mid-levels of the atmosphere, then, you've got 40 to 50 knots out of the due west, and that brings this storm motion vector closer to the XY axis there. It's not really an XY axis, but closer to that axis. And that is what makes the critical angle there near 90 degrees possible. Looking at the rest of the sounding, you can see a big elevated mix layer coming in there. That's that dry air at about 500 millibars. This is the EML, or the elevated mix layer. And that's critical for supercell formation there because it steepens the lapse rates aloft. And a lot of times you'll see those mid-level clouds just clear out, and then you see explosive supercells that are developing within that clear air. That's this dry air coming in at the mid-levels, steepening the lapse rates, increasing the CAPE, which is the area between that parcel ascent and the red environmental temperature there. That's all CAPE, all the way up to the equilibrium level, or the top of the tropopause, which is the lower atmosphere. And one thing I see here is incredible directional shear. You got a south-southeasterly surface wind that's weak due to the decoupling, and then it goes up to southwesterly at about 30 to 35 knots. And then due westerly mid-level winds at about 50 knots. That's what you're seeing here in the photograph. See that 50 ring right there? That's how you plot these. Wind is represented by direction and a magnitude. That's a vector. And here you have the magnitudes, and then the direction is plotted like a compass on the photograph. So in this case, you've got a pretty weak surface wind. A kilometer above the ground, you've got a south-southwest wind at 35 knots. 2 kilometers, you've got a due southwest wind at 30 knots. And then you've got these mid-level winds closer to 40 knots. And this is a big looping photograph. Look at this massive hook-like photograph. And the area within the storm motion vector and that photograph curve right here is proportional to the storm relative helicity within the layer of interest. Another thing you can see here is a lot of deep moisture. We're going to see this in the surface map here in a little bit. You've got dew points in the low 70s in southwest Missouri. Temperatures near 80. Plenty of instability there. So now I want to break down the surface map just a bit. This is this morning's surface map. We can do a little bit of hand analysis. Hand analysis is good because as you're sitting there drawing these lines, sometimes you can pick out features that maybe the models might miss. And a lot of the old school meteorologists are big fans of these hand analyses. They'll whip out the colored pencils and sit there breaking it down. Hand analysis is definitely important because it causes you to take a step back, take your time just a little bit, and you can really analyze what's going on. Here you can see a cold front that is in place across central Oklahoma into northwest Texas. Temperatures really start to fall just a bit. Once this wave moves by and this ridging slides off to the east, this area is going to begin to feel the impacts of that trough to the west. And this front, these winds back behind the front are going to become more easterly instead of out of the north. The front's going to stall out and eventually lift back north as a warm front, as a surface low is going to develop across western Oklahoma, move off in this general direction. And that's going to be the target area for Monday, late afternoon and evening up here across southwestern Missouri, southeastern Kansas. But this is the front based on the wind shift. If you base it purely on the temperature gradient, the temperature fall does lag just a bit. Look at this 87 here. That's some compressional warming right along that front near the Wichita Falls area, just to the west of Wichita Falls, probably near Vernon. That little spike there is due to compressional warming just ahead of that front. It compresses the atmosphere just a bit, compresses that column, and you can get some low-level temperature spikes like you're seeing right there. And then the temperatures out ahead of the front are a little bit more mild due to the increase in moisture. You've got just a little bit of low clouds with that moisture return. Overall, though, you can see dew points in the mid to upper 60s, even some 70s out here. Moisture is definitely not going to be an issue tomorrow. The cap strength that everyone was so concerned about is not going to be an issue tomorrow. In fact, it's going to suppress supercell initiation until late afternoon, until closer to peak heating. They're going to erupt across southeastern Kansas, backbuild down into northeastern Oklahoma, and then move through this zone, definitely with that tornado threat. But this is this morning's surface map. And another thing we could see on this surface map is the outflow boundary right in this zone. Just to the north of that outflow boundary, you've got some rain-cooled air causing that. That's from that bow echo that has been moving through southwestern Missouri, causing this slightly modified cooler air off to the north of it, untainted warm sector off to the south of it. Look at this deeper moisture too. Even though you do have some more veered winds out here, you do have a bit of backing just ahead of this jet streak right there across eastern Oklahoma. And then you have some more southwesterly winds ahead of it. Despite those veered winds though, you still have some deep moisture that this line will propagate into. The moisture does tail off just a little bit, but you've got some upper 60s that are going to be streaming northward through the Mississippi River Valley there. Now we can draw these lines. We'll use green to do the we'll do 65. Everything is above 60 out here. There we go. That's why you need colored pencils, so you can just keep erasing this. Little terrain action here with some of these dew points. This is the 65 line. You can definitely see some advection of that moisture up the Mississippi River Valley there. Some drier air over southeastern Louisiana. You certainly do have a blob of 65 plus dew points just waiting for this wave to come in from the western U.S. I don't see any 70s, but they're going to come up next. So the Gulf definitely recovers rapidly this time of year, even when you don't have a massive synoptic scale low-level jet. It's like some evapotranspiration there. Could be an anomalous OB near 70. Definitely have some evapotranspiration, though, from the winter wheat crops out here across southern Oklahoma, far northwestern Texas there. With the heating of the day, the sun happens, the crops release moisture through a process called transpiration. Some evaporation also happens. Combination of those two things is evapotranspiration. We could do the 60 line over here. Something like that. You get the idea. Really the point of this surface analysis was to discover this area of compressional warming right there. You can see this outflow boundary that is across northeast Oklahoma into southwestern Missouri in association with that severe weather there. You got this blob of moisture out ahead of this bow echo, which is going to allow that convection to help propagate, turn that whole bow echo a little bit right into that deeper moisture. Definitely will maintain it for a while, probably through the Mississippi River Valley at least, where those deeper dew points are already in place, because there's not a huge low-level jet to rapidly transport those major dew points off to the northwest. But even out here, you've got low to mid-60s dew points across western Tennessee. Just a little bit of mixing happening maybe down there with those dew points in the mid-60s, just a bit lower, maybe a little bit less evapotranspiration over the pine forests down there in southeastern Texas. But tomorrow is definitely of most interest, and that's what I really want to start covering now. So let's start off with the new HRRR, the 12Z HRRR. This is on the Pivotal Weather website. Great website for visualizing models. The HRRR has a couple of supercell storms here, broken line developing along that front. Let's zoom out though and get an idea of what everything looks like. There's that convective line. This is at 0Z. And here is the trough. Looks like the trough axis is going to be a little bit ahead of this, but it has quite a bit of flow on the back side of it. What an interesting system this is going to be. So this trough continues to deepen over the eastern Pacific and actually build a ridge over the far western U.S. And a piece of that jet streak that we were just looking at breaks off the eastern side of that ridge. And you do have some cyclonic curvature though, subtle cyclonic curvature ahead of that. That's just going to be enough to excite a southwesterly low-level jet at about 30 knots. Here you can see that low-level jet axis, 20 to 30 knots at 4 p.m., and it only increases between 4 p.m. to 0Z, 0Z being 7 p.m. Z stands for Zulu time, or Greenwich Mean Time, which is just a way to have a time for weather maps that isn't impacted by the time zones or daylight savings time. It's based on the time in England near the prime meridian. And 0Z, which is 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. 12Z is the morning out there, which is 7 a.m. So it's basically military time in the UK, but you subtract the hours to get it over to US time. Eventually you just remember it and memorize it. That sounding that we already broke down, the HRRR sounding, was taken just ahead of this convective line in southwestern Missouri with that 30 to 40 knot, 1 kilometer wind. 700 millibars, about 3 kilometers. You also have some strong flow, 35 to 40 knots. Seems like strong flow at all levels, 1 kilometer, 3 kilometer, the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. Looking at the surface-based cape, you can see this streamer of cape streaming northward ahead of that front. There's going to be a surface low near the Kansas-Oklahoma border by this time. Lots of cape. Big hail producers, gorilla hail producers. The effective surface low is going to be near this region, right near the Kansas-Oklahoma border, even though the model is trying to put the surface low back here. There's going to be a pseudo surface low a little bit further east near the Kink, southeastern Kansas, northeastern Oklahoma, and ahead of that surface low is where the most intense wind shear is going to reside. And this is just one model. But the NAM, the morning NAM, one of my favorite models, is certainly in agreement with it. Here you can see the front. You can see the surface low. Southeasterly is ahead of that surface low. Winds veer just a little bit in northeastern Oklahoma, but still beneath a 30-knot low-level jet. You'll have supercell structures with slightly lesser tornado threat, but up here, just to the east of the surface low, southwestern Missouri, southeastern Kansas, that's where I expect significant severe weather tomorrow. And it's going to initiate just to the east of this surface low over southeastern Kansas, probably near the Coffeyville area. Looking at the dew points, you've got some pooling of those dew points, even some lower 70s up here just ahead of that surface low. This is going to be basically a pseudo warm front that's lifting off to the north. This was that cold front that we were just analyzing on the surface map. That's going to lift back north ahead of this wave and pool that moisture ahead of the surface low. Dew points definitely near 70. Storms initiating pretty close to 4 to 5 p.m. just ahead of this. There is a strong cap, but there's so much moisture that this cap should be broken. This is at 6 p.m. when the storms finally initiate. So the HRRR has initiation between about 5 and 6 p.m. over far southeastern Kansas. Likely going to be tornado warnings in this. You could start off a little bit further north and then drop down the line into southwestern Missouri. Favorable hodographs throughout ahead of this convective line and these supercells. Big looping hodographs, 1-2 kilometer winds in excess of 30 knots already at 21Z, 81 over 72 here. Big directional shear here at the lowest, 1 to 2 kilometers. Critical angle pretty close to 90 degrees with these due easterly storm motions at about 25 knots. And with a little bit of decoupling closer to 0Z, closer to sunset, you weaken the surface wind just a little bit, and that even elongates the hodograph even more so. This is a hodograph here. This is the drier air coming in at the mid-levels, the EML steepening those lapse rates. And so this is a broken line of supercells moving into a very unstable environment, strong low-level shear. Here you can see the 0 to 1 kilometer raw storm relative helicity in excess of 150 to 200 ahead of these storms. And this is going to ramp up as you go to 0Z. See how it increases out ahead of these across southwestern Missouri, even approaching 300 0 to 1 kilometer shear up there in southwestern Missouri ahead of these storms. Just for completeness, let's look at the NAM. The NAM shows that as well. Similar evolution of that surface low with the strongest wind shear across southwestern Missouri there, bringing it back to 4 p.m. Now let's go to the wrap. Probably can't look at it, but we will tonight. Big time. So these are the new models, and it is looking like a big time severe weather event across southwestern Missouri, southeastern Kansas, into northeastern Oklahoma. Chase mode is about to be activated. I'm going to be leaving, heading that direction today. And then I got to come back here on Tuesday to do an interview for National Geographic. We're working on an archive series using some of my older footage. I'm going to have to drive all night back to make it here by 3 p.m. on Tuesday. But this is a big deal. This is going to be a big event tomorrow. Here's a final look at that target area too. Oh, never mind. Let's pull up the radar instead and look at that bow echo. Because I already know what the target area is, but look at that bow, that gyre there now to the due east of Marshfield, basically in the Ozarks, but right to the east of Marshfield, you can see there where that 1 is located. That's a hail size marker, but right there is a comma head on the north side of that bow. So you're getting some cyclonic vorticity up in that region up here. Looks like the strongest winds are headed toward Mountain Grove any minute. Mountain Grove, you are about to get hammered. Right there, look at that near Mountain Grove. About to be some big time winds coming in. This is on the Radar Omega app, breaking this down. They're about to have some big updates on here with a butter smooth back map. There you can see these winds. About to knock on the door of Mountain Grove in excess of 60 miles an hour. Hail sizes 1.25 inches. Severe thunderstorm warning in effect. and this line is blasting east and to the southeast. The strongest winds are actually just to the south of the apex of that bow and up near the comma head. It looks like they're a little weaker, but here you can see the hint at a rear inflow jet as well. Those westerlies that fly into the apex of that bow definitely being shown here on radar. But Mountain Grove, you probably want to be away from those windows, maybe even in your safe place. You're about to have some very strong straight line winds with this severe thunderstorm. So thank you everybody for joining me on this live briefing. These live briefings I normally do to the Facebook supporter community on here every day during the upcoming down period with these 7 to 10 days being off. We are going to be breaking down all kinds of case studies for you guys. We already did one on May 3rd, 1999, but I'm also going to be reactivating my live streams as I head out there. Tomorrow, late afternoon and evening, southwestern Missouri, but I'll be starting off in southeastern Kansas. So thank you everybody. Have a good rest of your Sunday. Be safe if you're out ahead of this bow echo, and stay tuned to those watches and warnings. Or stay tuned to those watches and warnings, especially tomorrow, late afternoon and evening.